She only wanted to protect the truth. Instead, she vanished, leaving behind a severed hand, a porcelain doll, and a dog who refused to forget her. When K9 Titan sank his teeth into a suitcase at the airport, no one knew it would unravel a secret buried beneath years of silence, power, and betrayal. This isn't just a story about justice. It's about a girl's whisper that became a roar, and a dog's loyalty that refused to die. What they uncovered will break your heart and restore your faith in the unseen. If this story touches your heart, please share it with someone who needs to believe again. Leave a comment if you've ever felt a silent prayer answered in an unexpected way. And if you believe that God watches over the broken and the brave, leave an amen below to join in the faith. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of the quiet power of love, faithfulness, and the mysterious ways God works. May He bless you. The late afternoon sky over Dallas hung heavy with gray clouds, the kind that whispered of an oncoming storm but refused to burst. A damp chill clung to the concrete structures of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, coating the air in a thin sheen of mist. Inside Terminal C, the fluorescent lights hummed with a mechanical steadiness, their artificial brightness a stark contrast to the gloom outside. Travelers bustled about, dragging wheeled suitcases, sipping burnt coffee, or staring blankly at gate monitors. Among the din, Lieutenant Natalie Reeves walked with silent alertness, her boots echoing softly on the polished tile floor, a leash held firmly in her left hand. At the other end of that leash was Titan, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a storm-gray coat and amber eyes that rarely blinked. His movements were precise, disciplined, and quiet, until they weren't. Titan was no ordinary patrol dog. He was a veteran K9, specially trained for narcotics and remains detection, with a record of over 50 successful finds. There was a subtle scar running along his left hind leg, a silent remnant of the drug raid where he'd nearly lost his life and where Natalie had found him, bloody, emaciated but defiant. She'd pulled him from the wreckage of a cartel hideout, and since that day, they'd been inseparable. Natalie, in her early 40s, was lean and upright, with pale green eyes that missed nothing and short ash-brown hair kept tucked under a dark navy cap. Years of service had carved a permanent line between her brows and a heaviness to her gait. She wore her DFW security uniform with military crispness, but it was the glint of her silver lieutenant's badge and the way she scanned every corner that made people move aside. She wasn't just another officer. She was one of those haunted ones, at least that's what they whispered behind her back. 5 years ago, her younger brother, Kyle Reeves, a firefighter with the Dallas Fire Department, vanished during a warehouse blaze. His body was never recovered, and the official cause of death was presumed lost. Natalie never bought it. Since then, grief had settled into her bones like winter frost, invisible but permanent. The pair moved through the arrival level, weaving between tourists and flight crews, Titan sniffing occasionally at duffel bags and carry-ons with practiced disinterest. Until they reached Carousel 5. It happened in a blink. Titan stopped cold, his muscles stiffening. Then he growled low and primal, a sound Natalie had only heard twice before. His eyes locked on a single black suitcase, ordinary in every way, rolling along the conveyor like hundreds of others. But Titan lunged. His bark shattered the terminal's mechanical monotony. Startled travelers froze mid-step. A child screamed. Someone dropped their coffee. Titan's front paws slammed against the metal edge of the carousel, teeth bared, leash taut like a drawn bowstring. "Titan, heel!" Natalie barked, but he didn't budge. Passengers began backing away, creating a widening circle of fear. The suitcase continued its mindless orbit, but Titan wouldn't let up. His hackles bristled. He barked again, this time desperate, almost frantic. Natalie's hand hovered near her belt, just inches from her radio. She scanned the crowd for threats, but saw only startled faces. Then her eyes caught movement, a man about 40 feet away, halfway to the exit. He'd stopped walking. His hands were jammed into the pockets of a gray trench coat, his head bowed low. But his eyes, they weren't on the commotion. They were fixed on the suitcase. His expression wasn't surprise or confusion. It was dread. Natalie's instincts flared. She clicked her mic, Unit C-41, potential biohazard alert at Carousel 5. Isolate the area and secure that man in the gray trench coat, eastbound exit corridor. 2 officers responded immediately, breaking off from a nearby patrol post. As they approached, the man took a hesitant step back, then another. Natalie saw the moment his knees locked and his throat tightened. Panic. She stepped between Titan and the conveyor belt, now facing the suitcase directly. "It's okay, buddy," she murmured, though her heart raced. "I believe you." Airport security moved to clear the area. Titan's barking stopped as suddenly as it began, but he remained locked in position, tail stiff, chest heaving. Natalie knelt beside him and gently laid a hand on his neck. She could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. The suitcase circled once more before being halted by a technician with gloved hands. It was carefully lifted off the belt and placed in an isolation bin. Natalie didn't relax, not even when the gray-suited man, now identified as Raymond Clark, was escorted away without resistance. He was tall, mid-50s, with a receding hairline and an accountant's slouch. His coat looked too heavy for Dallas weather, and his shoes, though polished, didn't match the rest of his outfit. There was something wrong about him, something that didn't fit. Clark didn't speak. He didn't ask what he was being accused of. He didn't protest. He simply glanced once more at the suitcase as it disappeared behind security doors, and then lowered his head. Natalie stood and exhaled slowly. She glanced at Titan, who now sat calmly beside her, ears alert but no longer frantic. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out his favorite liver treat. He took it gently, as if nothing had happened. But Natalie knew better. The evidence lab at the Dallas Police Department was lit by sterile white bulbs and smelled faintly of ammonia and latex. Cold steel tables lined the walls, and the hum of the refrigeration units in the back sounded like whispers never meant to be heard. Lieutenant Natalie Reeves stood behind a two-way glass pane, arms crossed, jaw locked tight, as a forensic technician carefully unlatched the black suitcase that Titan had singled out at the airport. A single fluorescent light flickered above the table, casting thin shadows across the scene. The technician, a small-framed man with cropped red hair named Vincent Arlo, was known in the department for his precise yet overly cautious approach. Vincent had a soft, reedy voice and a nervous habit of adjusting his latex gloves more times than necessary. He wore square-frame glasses that perpetually slid down his nose and a white lab coat a size too big. Still, his reports were thorough, his results trusted. Natalie respected him, though she'd never admit it aloud. He opened the suitcase slowly, layer by layer, removing a folded cardigan, 2 paperback novels, and an assortment of toiletries, all meant to mislead. But at the bottom, wrapped in a shawl like a sleeping infant, lay a pale porcelain doll. Its eyes were glassy and dead, fixed into the distance. The doll's white dress was trimmed with aged lace, and its face, cracked diagonally from forehead to chin, gave it a disturbingly human look. Vincent paused, exhaled, then gently lifted the doll from the case. As he did, something small and solid slipped from beneath the layers of fabric and thudded softly against the steel tray. A gloved hand reached out, lifting it. Natalie felt the air thicken. A human hand. Severed at the wrist, pale, fingers slightly curled inward. Rigor mortis had long passed, and the skin had begun to prune. The hand was female, young, and grotesquely out of place against the cold metal. On the wrist, dulled by time and dirt, was a silver bracelet. Even from behind the glass, Natalie could make out the initials. EB back in the observation room, she heard a whisper from her right. "We'll run DNA tonight. I'll put a rush on it." The voice belonged to Dr. Daniel Whitmore, the medical examiner for the Dallas County Coroner's Office. Tall and lanky, Daniel moved like someone always in thought, his long limbs trailing slightly behind his mind. His salt and pepper hair had grown a little since Natalie last saw him, and his neatly trimmed beard gave him a professor's air. He wore a gray wool blazer over a dress shirt rolled to the elbows, a habit he never abandoned from their days in academy training. Daniel had once been more than a colleague. Years ago, in the wake of Kyle's disappearance, He had been the only one who stood by her when everyone else said it was time to let go. But grief makes brittle lovers, and Natalie's need for control eventually drove them apart. Now, standing next to him, she felt that strange old ache resurface. "Do you believe in instinct?" she asked, eyes still on the hand. Daniel nodded without looking at her. "Only when it's yours." They shared a brief, loaded silence before Natalie turned away and left the room. Down the hall in Interrogation Room B, Raymond Clark sat hunched over a metal table, his hands cuffed but trembling slightly. Clark was 52, balding, with thick bifocals and a nervous tic that caused his upper lip to twitch every few seconds. His shirt collar was stained with sweat, his tie pulled loose like a man already mourning his own fate. Detective Marcus Lang, a former state trooper with a thick southern drawl and a frame like a linebacker, stood near the one-way glass, arms crossed. Lang had a reputation for being both fair and formidable, with a booming voice that could silence an entire precinct and an empathy that often caught suspects off guard. "I didn't know what was inside," Clark said again, voice quivering. "I was told it was antiques. Family heirlooms. The guy met me in a diner off I-45 in Houston. Gave me the case and $5,000 in cash. Said he'd pay double if I delivered it without questions." Natalie sat across from him, her expression unreadable. "What did he look like?" Clark fumbled for words. "Mid-40s, maybe. Walked with a limp. Had gloves on the whole time. Said his name was Michael. No last name." Natalie leaned forward. "You said something earlier, about dreams." Clark swallowed hard. "They started 3 nights ago. I thought I was losing my mind. I kept seeing this girl, long brown hair, white dress. Her mouth was open like she was screaming, but no sound ever came out. Every time, she was holding out her hand to me. The same hand. With the bracelet." He broke into quiet sobs. "I didn't kill anyone. I swear to God." Natalie didn't respond. She simply rose and walked out. Later that evening, Daniel called her from the lab. DNA results just came back. The hand belongs to Eden Bradley. Missing for 92 days, age 23, last seen leaving work from a diner off Route 67. Natalie closed her eyes. She remembered the flyer. Young woman, bright smile, brunette, worked night shifts to pay for college. She had vanished without a trace. Until now. Daniel hesitated. "There's more." The cut on the wrist, clean, surgical. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. This wasn't rage. It was deliberate. Natalie stared out the precinct window as lightning flickered in the distant clouds. Thunder didn't follow. Just silence. The next morning broke with a muted hush across Dallas, the clouds hanging low like a heavy curtain over the waking city. A pale drizzle misted the streets, slicking the sidewalks and muting the colors of passing cars. Natalie Reeves sat behind the wheel of her department-issued SUV, fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel as she approached a cluster of aging brick buildings nestled in a quiet corner near South Oak Cliff. The complex was once a student dormitory affiliated with a local community college, but had since devolved into budget rentals for students and low-income workers. Apartment 2B was the last known residence of Eden Bradley. Titan, seated in the back seat with his muzzle resting on the divider, let out a low whine as they parked. His coat was darker in the dim light, his posture relaxed but alert, ears twitching at every passing footstep. Though he had been unusually quiet that morning, Natalie knew his silence wasn't indifference, it was focus. He always sensed when a scene mattered. The hallway inside smelled of mildew and old carpet. The paint on the walls peeled in thin curls, revealing layers of forgotten colors beneath. Natalie was greeted by Jenna Mallory, the current occupant of Eden's old room. Jenna was a petite woman in her early 20s, with deep-set hazel eyes and blunt-cut black hair dyed with fading blue streaks. Her hoodie was oversized, sleeves pulled down over bitten fingernails, and she carried herself like someone perpetually cold. "I don't usually talk to cops," Jenna said quietly as she unlocked the door. "But something's wrong with that room. Has been since I moved in." Inside, the apartment was sparse, a twin bed, a desk, and a sagging dresser. Titan walked in first, nose twitching, tail stiffening. Natalie followed, noting the subtle chill in the air, though the heater was humming gently. The window beside the bed had been painted shut years ago, and the overhead bulb flickered with weak orange light. Jenna crossed her arms tightly. The first night I moved in, I couldn't sleep. It felt like someone was watching me from the corner. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd feel it. And then the dreams started. Natalie turned. Dreams? Jenna hesitated, then nodded. A girl, pale, soaked hair, standing at the end of the bed. She didn't speak. She just looked desperate and sad. I left town for a few weeks after the second one. When I came back, the dreams got worse. Natalie scanned the room. Titan had frozen beside the bed, his nose pressed to the wall. Then, unexpectedly, he began to whine, a soft, distressed sound that made Natalie's skin crawl. She knelt beside him and followed his gaze. There, half hidden by the headboard, were 10 long gouges etched into the plaster, as if fingernails had clawed desperately at the wall. The grooves were uneven, broken in places, and one even had a fragment of pink polish embedded at the edge. These weren't here before, Jenna whispered. Not until after I moved in. Natalie gently ran her gloved fingers along the gouges. They were shallow, but unmistakably human. She took photographs, marked the position, then turned back to Jenna. Has anyone else seen anything? Jenna nodded slowly. The security guard, Rick, he quit 2 weeks ago, said he saw a girl walking the hall after midnight. Long brown hair, white shirt. When he called out, she turned a corner and vanished. Natalie's jaw tightened. Later that afternoon, Natalie sat in the archives of the Dallas Medical Records Bureau with Daniel. The building was sterile and windowless, its silence broken only by the whirring of printers and distant murmurs from clerks. Daniel handed her a slim manila folder stamped with Eden Bradley's name. No history of mental illness, Daniel said. No meds, no episodes, nothing flagged at all. He sat across from her, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. I also pulled toxicology from the severed hand. No sedatives, which means Eden was likely alive when it was removed. That changes things. Natalie closed her eyes for a brief moment, forcing back the shiver crawling up her spine. She opened the folder again. Inside was a photocopy of Eden's last physical exam. Healthy. Weight, 127 pounds. Height, 5 feet 5 inches. Notes, bright, focused, no signs of distress. Eden Bradley, 23. A scholarship student studying business administration. According to her professors, she was bright but guarded. According to her roommate, she spent more time at work than in class. According to her parents, she wanted to save money to apply for nursing school. Her face stared out from the corner of the file, a DMV photo, serious eyes, lips pulled into a reluctant smile. She wasn't crazy, Natalie said finally. She was scared. There's a difference. Daniel nodded. We need to find out what happened in that room, and why Titan reacted the way he did. That evening, Natalie returned to Eden's apartment alone. Titan padded beside her, tail low, body alert. The complex was quiet. Jenna had left to stay with friends. Natalie stood at the edge of the room, letting the silence settle. Titan moved slowly, sniffing the air, then stopped again at the bed. This time, his ears folded back flat against his head, and he growled softly, not with aggression, but unease. Natalie turned on her flashlight and scanned the floorboards. One plank creaked slightly beneath her boot. She knelt, pried it open with a flathead key. Beneath the hollowed space was a small spiral-bound notebook, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag. She lifted it carefully and opened the first page. The handwriting was tight, anxious. The first entry dated 2 weeks before Eden disappeared. Someone's been following me after work. I thought it was a regular customer, but now he knows my schedule. He waits outside the diner. I'm scared. I haven't told anyone yet. Natalie flipped through quickly. The last entry stopped mid-sentence. He said he could make or break my future. He knows where The ink trailed off in a jagged line. Natalie sat in the silence, the notebook in her lap, her fingers trembling slightly. In the darkened hallway outside, a motion light flicked on for no reason. Rain fell in steady sheets over Dallas as dusk crept across the city, blurring traffic lights into smeared ribbons of red and gold. Natalie Reeves leaned against the frame of her office window, her thoughts tangled with fragments of Eden Bradley's final days. The notebook found under the floorboards still lay open on her desk. The pages smelled faintly of dust and mildew, the ink smudged where Eden's pen had pressed too hard, likely with fear. Outside, the storm made the city feel smaller, quieter, and heavier with secrets. Titan rested on his blanket beside her desk, his tail curled tightly against his side, ears twitching now and then. He had been more anxious than usual, restless at night, alert to sounds that others couldn't hear. At 6 years old, his build was still strong and sharp, but there was a subtle weight to his movements lately, a tiredness Natalie couldn't ignore. She knelt beside him for a moment, running her fingers behind his ears. He pressed his head into her hand without a sound. On her monitor, a search was running across Eden's iCloud backup, a judicially approved pull of her phone data. The screen flickered and then froze on a set of image thumbnails. Natalie clicked. Photograph after photograph appeared, grainy, low-light images taken from what looked like the back storage room of a roadside diner. Crumpled napkins, coffee-stained menus, but in the foreground of several shots were paper documents, shipping manifests, invoices, company letterhead reading Larkson Freight Logistics. In one frame, a man in a dark tailored suit leaned forward across the table, his head turned slightly. His face was partially obscured, but Natalie recognized the square jaw, slicked back dark hair, and unnaturally white teeth. Henry Voss. Voss was the CEO of Larkson Freight, a powerful figure in Southern logistics, known for moving product with ruthless efficiency across 6 states. He was tall, in his early 50s, always immaculately dressed, with sharp gray eyes that gave away nothing. His name had surfaced in 3 harassment cases over the past decade, each one dropped or settled out of court. He was also a known donor to state-level political campaigns, often invited to gala events, photographed beside judges and mayors. Clean. Untouchable. Natalie leaned back in her chair, the photograph still open on screen. Eden had been following him. She hadn't just been scared. She'd been digging. She picked up her phone and dialed Daniel. "Are you sitting down?" she asked when he answered. "God, what now?" "I've got photos of Henry Voss in a back room at the diner Eden worked. He's not eating. He's running meetings." Daniel exhaled. "I just finished running the DNA trace from Eden's bracelet. You're going to want to hear this too." "Hit me." The partial DNA from the bracelet, besides Eden's, matches an active missing persons file. Female, 26. Name's Brianna Kessler. Vanished 4 months ago in Oklahoma City. No connection to Eden. No reason their DNA should overlap unless they shared personal contact or were in the same place. And that's not all. A third trace, weak, possibly degraded, matches another missing woman, Casey Dumont. Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Missing 6 months. Natalie closed her eyes for a moment. That's 3 women. 3 states. All vanished within 6 months. And now we have evidence Voss might be the thread tying them together. I think this goes beyond him, Daniel. This doesn't feel like one man's obsession. This feels organized. Daniel's voice dropped to a cautious register. You're thinking federal. I'm thinking interstate trafficking. Smuggling. Women moved across state lines under fake manifests. And Larkson Freight has the infrastructure to do it. Natalie hung up and called up the city traffic camera archive. She cross-referenced the night Eden disappeared with the timestamp from the photos. After scrubbing through half an hour of footage from the diner's back alley, she spotted it, a long-haul truck, unmarked white cab, parked for 18 minutes behind the diner, then leaving without loading or unloading. She zoomed in. Though the license plate was grainy, she could read enough digits to pull it. The vehicle was registered to a shell company. Natalie's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling corporate records. The company was called Sundown Solutions. Its only employee listed, Miles Granger, based in Houston. Natalie made a note to track him down. The next morning, she visited the diner where Eden had worked. The manager, Carla Hensley, a woman in her mid-40s with tight curls pulled into a bun and tired eyes, stood behind the register counting receipts. She wore a pink polo shirt with a faded logo on the breast and spoke with the clipped tone of someone always short on time. Eden? Yeah, I remember her, Carla said. Quiet girl. Kept to herself. Worked doubles because she wanted to go to nursing school. Did she ever mention someone bothering her? She didn't talk much, but I caught her once in the supply room with her phone out, snapping pictures of invoices. Natalie raised a brow. Invoices for what? Carla looked around and lowered her voice. We've had this guy, Voss. He comes in late some nights, meets with 2 or 3 others. They bring in these black binders, leave with nothing. Never order food. Told me they liked the privacy. Did you ever say anything? Carla shrugged. Didn't seem like my business. But Eden, she looked shaken after one of those nights. Told me she was thinking of quitting. Do you still have any of the paper records? Carla hesitated, then walked to the back. She returned with a shoebox of old receipts and delivery logs. Natalie flipped through them until she saw it. 2 weeks before Eden disappeared, a late-night delivery signed for by a Michael T. The same alias Raymond Clark had mentioned when he was interrogated. That night, back at the precinct, Natalie added 3 new strings to the case board. Pliona Kisla, Casey Dumont, Eden Bradley, all connected by DNA. All disappeared in states where Larkson Freight operated routes. All connected to Henry Voss. But Voss wasn't acting alone. The pattern was too neat, the logistics too clean. Someone higher up was making sure this stayed invisible. And Eden had gotten too close. The morning sun over Dallas was sharp and unfeeling, casting long slats of light across the windshield of Natalie's SUV as she drove in silence through Fair Park. Titan sat in the back seat, unusually still, his head resting low between his front paws. They were en route to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Center, just a routine checkup for a slight limp Titan had picked up during training weeks earlier, but the air between them was different today. Natalie couldn't shake the tension clinging to her spine, the way the city suddenly seemed too quiet, like something beneath its surface had shifted. Titan was her shadow, her partner, and her only constant. He was 6 years old now, his black and tan coat tinged with silver around the muzzle. His amber eyes were intelligent and wary, always scanning, always sensing. Natalie trusted him more than anyone left in her world. As they turned off the main road into a quieter stretch of industrial backlots, a black SUV idling at the far corner rolled forward without signaling. Natalie barely had time to register it before the vehicle lunged across the median. Her instincts kicked in, she swerved hard, tires screaming, but the SUV clipped her front bumper, spun her sideways, and skidded them into a rusted chain-link fence. Before she could reach her weapon, the rear door of the SUV flew open. A man in a dark hoodie stepped out, moving fast. There was no shouting, no warning, just the dull, muffled thud of a suppressed gunshot, and then the agonized bark of Titan as he lunged through the half-open window to intercept the shooter. Titan! Natalie's scream was buried in the chaos. She fired back instinctively, grazing the attacker's arm. He dropped his weapon and fled. The SUV screeched off before she could get a plate. Natalie stumbled out, blood rushing in her ears, only to find Titan lying on the pavement, panting shallowly, a patch of dark red spreading across his side. Emergency vet staff met them 10 minutes later. Titan was unconscious by the time they wheeled him inside, and Natalie, blood on her knuckles, jacket torn at the elbow, stood shaking in the waiting room as the door closed between them. Hours later, while Titan remained in surgery, Natalie sat in the hospital lobby with a detective she didn't recognize. His name was Captain Elliot Granger, Internal Affairs, early 50s, with a close-cropped haircut and expressionless green eyes. His posture was upright but relaxed, the kind that came from long years in quiet rooms with loud consequences. "Lieutenant Reeves," he said evenly, "you're being placed on administrative suspension effective immediately." Natalie didn't blink. "On what grounds?" "Conflict of interest. Your unauthorized continuation of an investigation tied to your brother's unresolved case, now linked to a suspect in a separate criminal probe." "They shot my dog, Captain." And you discharged your weapon in public while transporting a civilian K-9 off duty. Natalie laughed bitterly. He's not a civilian. He's my partner. Not while you're driving to a vet appointment. She stood. Let me guess. Someone upstairs got nervous when I connected Voss to 3 missing women. Granger didn't answer. Turn in your badge and firearm. Effective immediately. Natalie handed them over wordlessly. Elsewhere that evening, Dr. Daniel Whitmore was finishing his shift at the medical examiner's office when the package arrived. A plain yellow padded envelope, no return address, postmarked the day before. Inside was a USB stick wrapped in black cloth. Daniel turned it over in his palm before plugging it into a secure lab station. The folder inside was labeled only EB Final. The video was grainy, filmed in a dimly lit room. Eden Bradley sat in a wooden chair against a blank wall. Her face was pale, bruised at the cheekbone, and her long brown hair hung limp around her shoulders. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her eyes were defiant. My name is Eden Bradley, she began. If you're seeing this, I'm probably dead. Or worse. I found something huge. She went on to describe her discovery, manifest discrepancies, shadow company shipments, documents she photographed secretly. She named names, Henry Voss, Sundown Solutions, and a series of initials she claimed were associated with clients and handlers. Then she said something Daniel didn't expect. I've backed up everything. Photos, logs, audio. It's stored under a disguised email alias. Look for the folder marked Sparrow's Nest. You'll need the password. It's the middle name of the girl who used to sit in front of me in Econ 102. If you knew me, you know it. The video cut off suddenly. Daniel sat back, stunned. But before he could act, another call came through from the Dallas County Jail. Raymond Clark had attempted suicide. Daniel arrived at the infirmary wing an hour later. Clark lay pale against the white sheets, a bandage at his wrist. He looked 10 years older than the man they'd arrested, a shell of someone who'd once tried to keep secrets in neat accountant boxes. I wrote a letter, he mumbled when Daniel entered. I know, Daniel said, pulling up a chair. You confessed. Said you were part of it. Clark turned his head. It's not true. Then why write it? They told me to. They said if I didn't, they'd kill her. Daniel leaned forward. Kill who? Clark's eyes welled with tears. My daughter. Daniel went still. Clark's voice cracked. Her name is Eden. What are you saying? I left them when she was a baby. Her mother changed their names. I didn't know where they were for years. I only found Eden 6 months ago, working at that diner. I wanted to reach out. I didn't. I just watched her from a distance, like a coward. And then I got the suitcase. He sobbed into his hands. I didn't know it was her. I swear to God. I didn't know. Daniel said nothing for a long time. The red clay roads winding into the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma, were still slick from last night's rain, turning the farmland into a canvas of fog and mud. Morning mist clung low to the soil, weaving between broken fences and rusted grain silos. In the passenger seat of a borrowed department vehicle, Titan lay curled on a thick wool blanket, a shaved patch on his flank stitched and bandaged. He stirred now and then but remained calm, his loyalty too stubborn to be quieted by pain. His eyes, though drowsy, snapped open the moment they crossed the property line. Natalie Reeves, reinstated unofficially by Captain Monroe through a quiet favor, stared out at the approaching farm. Her badge was still suspended. Her sidearm had been returned, but her authority hung by a thread. None of it mattered. She wasn't here under orders. She was here for Eden, for the others. The property in question was listed under Clear Sky Holdings, a shell company linked to Larkson Freight via a labyrinth of LLCs and false addresses. The tip had come from a man named Miles Jensen, a former night driver with Larkson Freight who had worked routes across 3 southern states before being fired for insubordination. Miles was mid-30s, heavy-set, with a nervous energy that made his eyes dart like a rabbit's. He had pitted skin from old acne and a deep crease between his brows. Miles met Natalie in a diner off Route 66 2 nights earlier, chain-smoking through his confession. They moved stuff at night, he said, tapping the table rhythmically. Not just product. People. Always the same farm. Always someone waiting. Natalie hadn't pressed. His guilt had done most of the work. She had recorded everything. Now she stood at the edge of the property, staring at a wide stretch of neglected land. The barn sat like a relic from a more honest time, faded red paint peeling, roof sagging, a line of rusted cattle troughs discarded beside the door. Around her, a task force from Tulsa PD prepared silently, most of them local deputies with cautious eyes and drawn weapons. She was joined by Deputy Lisa Cordell, a stocky woman in her 40s with blonde hair tied back in a tight bun and a badge that carried weight among the nearby counties. Cordell had no patience for politics or orders that came too slow. "You sure about this?" Cordell asked, glancing down at Titan. Natalie nodded. "He's sure." Titan sniffed the ground, then moved, his steps deliberate despite his injury, his nose close to the dirt. He led them not to the barn's front, but around the side, past the collapsed fencing, to a half-rotted hay shelter behind the main structure. There, beneath a rusted tarp, he stopped, growled low, and began pawing at the dirt. Natalie knelt and cleared debris with her hands. Beneath the soggy hay and loose planks was a trapdoor, reinforced metal, recently oiled. She nodded to Cordell. "Get it open." They pried it free. A cold draft rose from below. The scent of mold, metal, and something else, something sour, rushed up. Titan didn't flinch. He descended first. The stairs led to a concrete cellar that stretched beneath the barn. Motion sensor lights flickered on as they entered, revealing a room that had no place on a farm. Clean floors, painted walls, metal shelving on every side, each labeled with dates and initials. Plastic containers stacked neatly. Natalie opened the first one. Inside were personal belongings. A necklace, a child's drawing, a driver's license, Casey Dumont. Another container held a diary, its first page dated 7 years ago. Another, a woman's watch, still ticking faintly. Cordell muttered, "This is a trophy room." A second door led deeper into the complex, a steel-reinforced hallway ending in a chamber lined with soundproof foam. There was a single iron-framed bed bolted to the floor. Leather restraints on each corner. A small table with an old camcorder still mounted on a tripod. Natalie moved closer. The table held memory cards, a roll of surgical tape, and a stained blanket folded too neatly. She turned to Cordell. "Get a tech unit. We don't touch this." Titan nosed the corner wall, whining again. Natalie followed him. There were scratches in the paint, long and uneven. Beneath the chipped surface, streaks of dried blood remained, thin lines, no longer red but unmistakable. She ran a swab across the wall, sealed it in a bag. A forensic officer entered the room moments later with a portable DNA reader. 30 minutes later, the match was confirmed. Edan Bradley. She had been here, and she wasn't the only one. Titan stopped again at a floor grate. He growled, pawing until Natalie moved the cover aside. A crawl space no wider than a coffin extended beneath the chamber. Inside was a ripped shirt, a plastic bracelet from a free clinic in Baton Rouge, and a folded paper marked only with the letter B. Cordell turned pale. There are other rooms. Underground. The foundation's deeper than it should be. This isn't just a shelter. It's a system. They expanded the search, locating 2 more rooms like the first. One had restraints. One had recording equipment hidden in the ceiling. Every item cataloged matched missing person reports filed between 2013 and 2023 across 5 states. This had been going on for a decade. Outside, the sun was rising higher, burning off the mist. Natalie stood beside Titan, who now sat calmly by her side, gaze fixed on the barn. She stroked his head and whispered, "Good boy." Back at the mobile command unit, they prepared a press release. But Natalie held off. She wasn't ready for cameras. Not until she found out who built this place. Who kept it off every record, every zoning inspection. Who protected it. Because Voss may have signed the checks. But someone much bigger had drawn the blueprints. The air over Dallas was dry and strangely still, as if the city itself was holding its breath. From the upper floor of a government safe house, Natalie Reeves stood by the window with her arms crossed, her silhouette backlit by the dull light of a late afternoon sun. The cityscape sprawled beneath her, a mixture of glass towers, brick warehouses, and the endless hum of life that, just days ago, felt as distant as another world. Titan lay at her feet, now recovered enough to walk without a limp, though the bandage on his side reminded her of how close she'd come to losing him. An hour earlier, a tactical unit had intercepted Henry Voss at a small airfield near Lubbock. He'd been wearing a ball cap, designer sunglasses, and carrying forged identification under the name Kenneth Boyle, a Canadian shipping consultant. But his face betrayed him, too familiar, too smug. As soon as they unzipped his duffel, they found burner phones, encrypted documents, and a thumb drive labeled only W2B. Natalie had flown out immediately. Voss was now sitting in an interrogation room inside the same building, his expensive suit slightly wrinkled, face pale but defiant. A once proud titan of logistics, now stripped of entourage and immunity. But as Natalie watched the live feed through the one-way glass, her instincts itched with a question. Why didn't he run sooner? Agent Paul Guerrero, a federal investigator from Homeland Security, leaned against the wall beside her. He was tall and lean, early 40s, with thick-rimmed glasses and an air of dry calculation. Guerrero had seen trafficking rings before. But this one, he said, smelled too clean. He's not scared, Natalie muttered. He's waiting. Guerrero nodded. Because he knows something we don't. Yet. Downstairs, in another secure room, Thomas Keller was working through the latest evidence. Thomas had once been Natalie's law school classmate and close friend, short, wiry, with shaggy brown hair and a wardrobe that never quite matched. After 2 years as a defense attorney, he'd gone into private investigation, specializing in corporate fraud. He was now the only civilian Natalie trusted outside the department. Thomas sat with a worn laptop, fingers moving fast. I followed the money trail, he said, without looking up. Voss's logistics firm wasn't just moving containers. They were laundering funds through phony customs declarations, most of it traced to a PAC fund registered under someone else's name. He turned the screen toward her. Guess who? A photograph filled the monitor. Senator Calvin Trent, late 50s, broad-chested with a practiced smile and silver hair parted perfectly. He looked like he belonged on Currency. A man beloved by Middle America for his clean politics and tough-on-crime rhetoric. He was also the front-runner in the Texas gubernatorial race. Natalie's stomach turned. Trent received quarterly transfers from Clear Sky Holdings, Thomas continued, all buried in the paperwork under property leases, land development proposals. I even found a private airfield owned by one of his cousins. Voss used it, repeatedly. So Trent's not just funding Voss, Natalie said, voice tight. He's using Voss. Guerrero entered with a tablet. It gets worse. We cracked the drive in Voss's bag. There's a secondary server tied to an off-site cloud system. Audio files, invoices, and get this, NDAs signed by people we suspect were coerced into silence. Every time a girl went missing, there's a line item in these logs. Codified payments. Someone was keeping track like it was inventory. Natalie's mind was spinning. Eden had stumbled into something massive. She hadn't just been a victim, she had been the match near a powder keg. Voss finally agreed to talk that evening, after 7 hours of silence. Inside the room, he looked tired, defeated, but underneath, something feral remained. He sat across from Natalie, who leaned forward with quiet intensity. You were never the head of this, she said softly. Just a mouthpiece. Voss exhaled slowly. I did what I was told. I provided logistics. I kept things neat. My reward was silence. Trent gave you silence. Voss didn't confirm, but his eyes gave him away. If you think the senator's just going to let this go, he said, then you're more naive than I thought. Natalie left the room without another word. Back in the analysis center, Thomas was waiting with more documents, PDFs, wire transfers, emails with timestamps from the last year. All of them pointed to one thing. Trent's campaign was being propped up by illicit funds, and those funds were soaked in blood. We have enough to indict, Guerrero said. But politically? This is suicide without airtight public proof. Natalie thought for a long moment. Then she pulled the USB Daniel had given her from her coat pocket, the one sent anonymously, the one with Eden's final message. In the dark of the observation room, they played the video. Eden appeared, seated against a blank wall. Her hair was unwashed, her voice calm but urgent. "My name is Eden Bradley," she said. "If you're watching this, I've been taken. I believe I found a connection between Senator Trent's re-election campaign and the movement of people across state lines. There's a password embedded in my email account. It leads to the evidence." Her eyes shimmered, not with fear but purpose. No one can run from the truth forever. When the screen went black, no one said a word. Outside, the sky turned a shade darker as clouds began to roll in over Dallas. A storm was coming. The sunrise over Dallas that morning was strangely golden, as if the sky had decided, for just one day, to drape the city in quiet grace. From the rooftop of the Department of Justice's Southern Regional Office, Natalie Reeves stood still, the medal on her navy blue uniform catching the light. The medal bore the insignia of bravery, and below it, engraved in thin script, "For valor beyond silence." Titan sat at her side, posture proud despite the barely visible scar along his left flank. His ears twitched with every shift in the breeze, and though his gait had only just returned to strength, he still exuded the confidence of a sentinel reborn. The previous night had been a whirlwind. Senator Calvin Trent, the man whose name had once inspired trust across the state, had been arrested in a stunning takedown at the San Antonio International Airport. He had tried to board a private charter to Panama, holding a diplomatic pass issued through one of his shell foundations. But the federal team was waiting. No sirens, no struggle, just a man who had run out of places to hide. The press exploded within hours. Charges of conspiracy, trafficking, obstruction of justice, and political corruption dominated every screen. The Department of Justice had already opened a federal investigation into a sweeping multi-state trafficking ring, naming 63 co-conspirators from Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and beyond. Names once whispered in power circles now blared across headlines. And Eden Bradley's testimony, through her encrypted video and data trail, was now considered the key that cracked the entire case open. Natalie had not attended Trent's arrest. She had been at Titan's side, sleeping on the tile floor beside his hospital bed. After a round of stem cell recovery treatments and intensive care, he had regained full mobility. The vet, Dr. Jalen Price, a tall, easygoing man in his early 40s with sandy hair and a sleeve of dog paw tattoos, called it the closest thing to a miracle I've seen. Titan, true to form, tried to chase a squirrel 2 days after discharge. Now, as the ceremony drew to a close and the applause faded, Natalie turned and saw a couple approaching through the crowd. Maria Bradley, Eden's mother, was a woman of grace and quiet sorrow. She was slender mid-50s, with long silvered hair tied in a low bun and soft olive skin. Grief lived permanently in her eyes, but so did strength. Her hand was locked with Robert Clark, Eden's estranged father, now sober, now present, now grounded by pain and purpose. He had not shaved in days, and his worn coat hung heavy on his shoulders, but the tremble in his voice when he greeted Natalie held nothing but gratitude. "We wanted to thank you," Maria said, voice steady but warm. "Not just for justice, for helping our daughter still speak." Natalie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. In partnership with local survivors' networks, Natalie, Maria, and Robert had founded the Eden Foundation. Its mission was twofold: to provide legal, psychological, and relocation support for survivors of trafficking, and to establish rehabilitation centers for injured K-9 units across the country. The Foundation's first building, Eden House, was already under construction near Plano. That afternoon, as storm clouds loomed in the distance, Natalie stood with Titan at a gravel lot outside a crumbling apartment complex in Denton. A 9-year-old girl named Layla Monroe had gone missing 3 days prior. Her last known location had pinged from a phone near this very lot. The field team had cleared most of the building, but Natalie wasn't convinced. She crouched beside Titan, gently scratching the ridge of his neck. "You smell something, partner?" Titan's ears perked, nose twitching. Then he moved low, deliberate steps toward a collapsed portion of the back wall. His pace quickened. He halted. Then his body went rigid. A single sharp bark tore through the silence, echoing off the nearby alley walls. Natalie moved quickly to his side. Behind the pile of debris, hidden behind drywall and soot-stained insulation, was a small wooden trapdoor, half-rotted and sealed with rusted hinges. She radioed the team. "We've got something. Might be a hidden crawlspace." As the others rushed over, Natalie felt her heartbeat steady, not speed up. Titan stood beside her, unblinking, still as stone. He wasn't just reacting. He was leading. For a moment, she thought of Eden, of the first suitcase, of the bruises on a dorm wall, and a porcelain doll concealing a severed hand. She thought of whispered names, of secret rooms beneath barns, of a girl who had no voice but left behind a roar. Eden was gone, but the echo of her courage lingered in every survivor's step toward safety, in every secret uncovered, and in every breath Titan took beside Natalie. Some legacies weren't made from monuments. They were made from actions, from vigilance, and from dogs who refused to look away. As the team pried the trapdoor open and the first flashlight beam disappeared below, Natalie spoke quietly. "Let's finish what she started." Some stories don't end with a period, they open a new door. The journey of Natalie and Titan reminds us of a simple but powerful truth. Miracles don't always come wrapped in thunder or glory. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a loyal dog, a young woman who refuses to stay silent, or a broken man who dares to seek redemption. Eden is no longer here to see justice served, but her voice never stopped speaking. Through the clues she left behind, the courage she held onto, and the quiet bark of a dog who never gave up, we are reminded that God can use even the smallest voices to reveal great truth. Darkness may hide the truth for a while, but light always finds its way through. And those who plant evil will never escape the gaze of a just God. In our daily lives, we may not face criminal conspiracies or hidden chambers, but we might be walking beside someone carrying silent pain. We might be the only light someone sees. Don't underestimate your presence. God may be using you to bring hope into someone's story. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a message of light and redemption. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss more stories like this one. And if you believe that God still works through the small and faithful, leave an amen in the comments to honor that truth. May God bless you and everyone you love.